Hello and welcome to Mountaintop Media and We the Parents. I'm Leslie and this is Katie. And we're back together and we are doing a Meet the Candidate series. And we have, and you know what, I'm just going to say it. My friend, Daniel Mercuri, we have gotten to know each other over the last few weeks, months, fighting child trafficking, and he's done a few interviews with us now, once on Ultra MK podcast, once on John Knight's podcast on Mountaintop Media, and now here at We the Parents. So welcome, Daniel. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me and allowing me to speak to your audience.
Absolutely. So Daniel, I know you have a really, really cool welcome video that we've done on every single podcast that we've done. But with our platform and our show, I feel like this one is just so much more appropriate. So we are going to do a video, and you had actually made this video before all of the events that took place. So once this video wraps up, I want you to tell us a little bit about that and how this video came to play. But
absolutely,
we're going to play that right now.
California is ranked #1 when it comes to child sex trafficking through our San Francisco Bay, the Los Angeles docks, the southern borders. You would think California lawmakers would put the protecting of our children at the top of their list, but they don't. The truth of the matter is, most of our representatives are too busy trying to help normalize pedophilia or excuse the acts of sexual predators, promote underage gender reassignment before our children even hit puberty, while allowing for the indoctrination of perverted and pornographic sex education into our schools. The biggest question the parents of our communities ask is, why? And the answer is simple. There is profit to be made off of the innocence of our children and the crude desire to destroy and redefine the traditional family to fit their twisted narrative. California legislative body spends way more time protecting the predator instead of the victims. Psychologists and school professors, they are desperately trying to rebrand terms like pedophiles as minor attracted persons or the acts of pedophilia as a dysmorphia instead of someone who is just simply a degenerate pervert. The exploitation, the trafficking of children in California with me as governor will end under my watch. Count on it. I'm not done fighting.
Okay, so Katie, that was your first time seeing that one, I think, right?
Oh, yeah. I wanted to stand up and clap, honestly.
I saw your head shaking. I saw all the reactions, so I kind of wanted to get your take on that.
Well, so first of all, you were telling us a little bit right before we got started that you actually made this video a while ago. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, it was during the 2022, and it was a topic that kept being brought up when I was traveling up and down the state of California, especially during the recall, 2021. And, I have children myself, and my children are homeschooled, mainly because my son, when his first day of pre-K, he was actually physically thrown by the vice principal across the room a couple times and dragged across the concrete. So we ended up in a lawsuit with the Los Angeles Unified School District about the incident. And I had sent my son to school after that time with a spy watch and a recording device and an audio recording device, both visual and audio. And it really kind of educated me as to really the deviance that goes on behind closed doors, that a lot of times parents just put their full trust into schools. And this was a charter school. So, there's no real safe haven. And when I had decided to make the run for governor during the recall, when you start traveling around, you go to different sectors of the state, people really have different issues going on that they are more in tune in, or something that tends to be their central focus. And so this was one that was up and down the state as a whole. This was a big topic. And the more I started looking into it, and because of my own incidents with the school, I really wanted to dig into child sex trafficking, human trafficking, and started realizing that this is a huge industry. And it forced me to go back and listen to some of our legislators, both at the federal and state level in multiple states. When you listen to key words, one of the main issues that I had come across was the fact that some of our major representatives would say things like, well, this isn't an industry that we're going to get entirely rid of, so it's best to kind of keep some of these people in play so that we can better monitor the situation. So the government was telling us that they were going to allow for the continued proliferation of children being kidnapped, children being utilized for these, sexual deviant acts, and these, these poor, sick actors behind the scenes that really just, unfortunately, use children for whatever these their sick desires are. And it didn't make sense to me. And so this is when I started getting into the numbers. I started looking at what's going on with our docks, and our open borders. And it's really on purpose because of the amount of money that's made in this industry, in the underground. And it's calculated regularly. I mean, again, you can do basic research. You can simply go into the public domain. You can find all these numbers, and you can see that this is a huge industry. And this is why we have the proliferation of open borders, and why they constantly fight to ensure that we allow for illegal immigrants, and then trying to, bait and switch with their language, right? They like to change the language to change perception so they can pass repugnant legislation that allows for them to continue to engage in these perversions. And they want you to think that it's being done lawfully on the surface. And so this is why I have a huge stance against, trying to, find someone that, that thinks that they can negotiate with both sides of the fence. I disagree with that, because when you look at the sickness that we have, and you look at the legislation that is passed, and we keep screaming, and I can't tell you how many board of supervisors, I've been to over 230 some odd cities out of 483 cities that we have here in the state of California. We have 58 counties, and I've been to countless board of supervisors, school board meetings, and city councils, and so on, and town halls with our legislators. And people are screaming at them, tearing, crying, and they're not listening, and everything is falling on deaf ears. And a lot of people say, we just need someone to appeal to a better side. These people do not have a better side. If they did, we wouldn't be in this mess in the first place, and we wouldn't have this sickness that's just constantly growing. We wouldn't have to have these, volunteer, centers or groups, or have to raise so much money to try to find a safe haven for these children. It's the people who are operating behind the walls of our government institutions that are allowing for this purposely. And to put somebody in office to simply negotiate with criminals, in my opinion, makes you a criminal. I do not want that person in office. I want someone who's going to hold these people accountable, someone who's going to stand up to them, not negotiate with them.
Yeah, for sure. So I definitely feel that. There's so many things you said. What I loved about the story about you going around talking to people, a lot of times our people that are running for office rely on these polls that ask very leading questions, and never, ever is it ever ranking problems with our children as high priority on any one of these things. And this is something that Leslie and I, we wish that we had money to run polls that actually talk about these issues: child sex trafficking, what's happening in our schools, our education system, our lack of parental rights. But as a candidate, you put the work in, and you listened to the people that led you to make this video, because you heard from the actual people, the constituents, and you acted. To me, that is the most governor leadership thing that I could ever want in somebody. And I just absolutely love hearing that. Our politicians these days are just so far removed from the people and what is happening with the people. And they look to council sitting on the bench there, or the swamp, their staff, to sit there and tell them that they're the experts and they know what's right. And it's incredible amount of pressure that these people are put under, and they continuously make the wrong decision. And it doesn't matter how many mama bears we bring into a meeting with their babies on their back and telling, the true stories of what's going on. They just buckle to this pressure of having these elite people telling them that they know best and that they have to go along with the law.
Right.
It is something that has to change. But to me, it has to change with the people and waking up the people, what you did with making that video and showing the true numbers to people. I mean, like I said, it just hit my heart and it made me want to stand up and just clap, because we need the people that are just outside, like maybe the grandmas and the grandpas, the ones that show up at the polls and vote. We need them to see what's actually happening for those of us mama bears on the ground.
Well,
Right.
one of the things that I've been trying to do, waking up the people, is I have been going around the state of California for years now, putting on symposiums and town halls, speaking to all kinds of groups, whether it's a CIA group, it's a parent group, a patriot group, groups that are just, unassociated from the parties. And it doesn't matter, how they vote. It's everybody in multiple communities. Like I said, I've been to so many different places. I've lost count. I've lost the name of, the names of the cities that I've been to up and down the state. I'm not doing it for money. I've, used my own dime, driving up and down, flying up and down, taking my laptop with me, and just trying to, show people, listen, you need to understand the laws. If you don't understand the laws yourself in your community, then there is no law. And if you don't understand your rights and how they work, then you have no rights. Mm-hmm. And they understand this. When you look at the California State Constitution, which nobody ever reads, and I'm going to ask you, have you ever read the California State Constitution?
I actually did, because Terry Raposa, he instilled that on me to go and do that. I was surprised to find out it's actually pretty good.
There's a number of
pretty good.
There's a number of paragraphs and there's a number of articles that are in sync and in unison, but you can't just read it. You also have to study it. You have to see where it's out of alignment. But one of the ones that is in alignment is Article 1, Section 3, where it talks about how our representatives, that the people have the right. It's not a privilege, but it's a right to consult and instruct our representatives. That's why they're there. This is why we need to stop using words like we need new leadership. The reason why you're having a hard time finding leadership is because they're not your leaders. You are. This is the whole point when people say things like, well, Daniel just wants to arrest everybody. No, I want to hold people accountable who have destroyed their oath of office. They have obliterated the right and the will of the people by subverting it with egregious legislation. That's illegal. And so, a lot of people say, well, that's, you're looking to take down the government. Well, let's just use that as a basis. It's not true, but let's just go with that argument. You are the government, right? Where does government derive their just powers? From the consent of the governed. So who's in charge? We are, right? So governments are instituted among men to secure the rights. This is their only job. It's written in the Declaration of Independence, right? That's a legal document that's used as an interpretive that the courts ensure, which is why we have a judicial committee to ensure that things are in agreement. The problem is that they play, to disrupt linguistical canons, and that's not their authority. So you have to understand then when they engage in egregious behaviors, and things must harmonize. But in order for that to happen, you have to know this. So I don't want a leader. I want a servant. I'm not here to lead you. I don't want to lead you. I'm here to serve you, right? And people say, well, just do the right thing. Well, I don't want to do the right thing. I want to do the God-given constitutionally right thing, because that's already been laid out before us by our forefathers. And I'm not here to fight for your civil rights, because civil rights are immunity and privileges given out by the government under eligibility through the exploitation of the contract clause. I'm here to fight for what's written in the Declaration of Independence, right? If governments are instituted among men to secure the rights, what rights? Well, you got to read the sentence above. And which one are they? Unalienable rights, God-given endowments. That's common law, not corporation. And this is what we need to be fighting for. This is why, again, I tell people, I'm here to ensure that these individuals who have passed egregious legislation purposely, willfully, are going to be sent to prison. It's taken me a long time to figure out how to do it legally, lawfully, and constitutionally. But this is why they have infringed upon deliberately in a Marxist tactic, which you just said a little while ago, that we have no more parental rights, that we're hanging on by a thread. Parental rights are actually written in the Constitution. And they're written in there in the Declaration of Independence, that we are of the laws of nature and of nature's God. Okay, so we are the laws of nature and nature's God. What does that mean? That means nature provided man and woman that which is innate to the environment. Our forefathers were genius. So what's innate to the environment when man and woman consummate, right? You create new DNA. New DNA is a part of the laws of nature and of nature's God. So a man and a woman, XXXY chromosomes, create life, which is why the right to an abortion is not legal, because it's not enshrined, and it's the antithesis to what does the Declaration of Independence say? That we've been endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among them is the right to what? Life, right? So it's government's job to ensure life prevails, not death, and to ensure that the laws of nature stand true, and that the laws of nature means that mom and dad, parental rights, ensure that since we are the governing body who created that child, government has no right to infringe or authority to be in the middle of that relationship or foundation. Their job is to ensure that the sanctity of a marriage in between a man and a woman and their child stays intact. That's the point of a representative.
So our biggest problem, though, right now is, the governed are giving up their rights on a daily basis.
Well, and
constantly.
That's why I was going to say,
it's like, yeah.
When you asked, have you read the California Constitution? Yes, it's easy to read the U.S. Constitution. It's easy to read the California Constitution. What's not easy to read, and why I did this, is the California law book that is changing by the day. It's like those bar graphs that change with time. It's ginormous. You cannot possibly know all the laws of California. And I told you the funniest story about, everybody's favorite lawmaker, Mr. Wiener, who ran from my friend and her 5-year-old and jumped a fence to get away from her because my 5-foot-tall friend is so scary. But this is who we have making laws. And I know you have very strong feelings about that, because we've talked a little bit about that. But I want to give you a broader space to talk on that, because our show meets the parents. Our show meets the individuals who probably don't want to vote. We have, and this is another thing we've talked about. We have white Christian women who want to sit at home and wait for God's pick to take over and just trust that this is what's going on because their church tells them to stay out of it. And so when you're speaking to the everyday moms about what their rights are and who's making the laws of what is going to affect their children, talk to those moms. I'm just going to give you like an open space to just address those moms. Come into their living room and tell them.
Well, think about it like this. If you're that individual who is waiting for Christ to come, you need to understand the stories of the Bible. And a lot of people utilize David and Goliath. Well, David still had to pick up a rock. He didn't just pray. He didn't just adhere. He didn't just listen to God. He still had to physically engage in what was actionable. The sword, was too big for him. The suit didn't fit. His brothers mocked him, but he knew how to sling. And he knew that he was a shepherd boy that was chosen by God. So he had to figure something out. And he took what he knew, what he was good at, and he utilized it. And he engaged in what was actionable and the tools that God gave him. And by doing so, he trusted in God. He engaged in that act, and he became king. When we sit there and we say, God's going to take care of it. Well, it reminds me of that old story. I think maybe you've probably heard, a lot of us have in church, but it's one of my favorites that I tell my children. When the flood came, the neighbors were screaming to their neighbors across the way who were on the roof to take the log, and the man said, no, God's going to save me. And then a boat came by, and they said, jump in the boat. And he said, no, God's going to save me. Then a helicopter came and dropped a ladder down, and he said, no, God's going to save me. And then he ended up drowning. What's the point of the story is that God comes in many different ways, giving you the opportunity. What you do with that opportunity is entirely up to you. Same thing with government. Government's job is not to provide equity or equality. Their job is to provide equal opportunity. What you do with that opportunity is entirely up to you. So if you sit around and you do nothing and you don't learn the laws and you're waiting for somebody else to come along, or you dive into the rhetoric and you're not realizing what you're saying, then you're falling prey to the egregious legislation that every day you wake up and you say, I didn't know that was law. I didn't know that my legislators are drafting, I think they draft between 2,000 to 5,000 bills a year, and 1,000 of them on average get signed into law. That is not for the benefit of the people. This is why the Constitution is written so intelligently, yet it's so small that, I can hold it in my hand and put it in my, pocket. That's how genius that was. When you look at the California State Constitution, this thing is a huge mess, and it's all over the map. And when you look at our tax laws, it is the size of the Bible, if not bigger. That's not for your benefit. And if we sit around and we do nothing and we don't involve ourselves and we wonder how we got here in the first place, it's because, just like in Hosea, it says, my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. But I want to go one step further. When people don't continue to read that verse, especially if you're a mom, right? God says that my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. And because you have forgotten thy laws, you are no priest to me. And because you have forgotten the laws of thy God, I will also forget your children. And what are we experiencing right now? An entire generation being forgotten by God because we have decided to engage in our decadence. We're afraid to lose the decadence. And yet Jesus told his disciples, to give up everything and to come with him. Well, how far does that go for you? And I'll tell you right now, when I've been running for office for this long, I can't tell you how much I'm hated, how much I'm blackballed, how many threats I get, death threats. I get it all the time. My family, instead of being afraid, we are all prepared. We are prepared to defend ourselves. We're prepared to make certain phone calls. We have prepared ourselves if we have to physically defend ourselves with, weapons, with guns. Even my children train. We're not going to just sit around and take it. And we have to be ready. Yes, I'm ready to lose my job. I'm ready to lose my home because of what we need to stand on. You can't say yes and no at the same time, right? You can't be lukewarm. You're hot or cold, right, and you're going to sound the alarm.
Absolutely. And, again, you were at Rev 17, and that entire event was about child sex trafficking and creating a haven for them and creating a safe space, which is, I don't know that serendipitous is even the right word, but just so amazing that you had made that video years before. It's like you said you've been in this race for a long time. You've been running year after year, election after election for this. And we all say, like, it's such a shame Gavin Newsom we didn't get him out. Oh, it's, what happened? Was it fraud? Was it fraud? Was it, what was this? What was that? But everything is in God's timing. This is where that line comes in that people are waiting on. Everything happens in God's timing. Yes. But that doesn't mean we sit by and wait idly by, because with Moms for Liberty, we have all the swag, everything that says for such a time as this. And I think it was Mary Flynn O'Neill that spoke at Rev 17 and said, everybody wants to get up there and say, for such a time as this. Actually, it might have been Tina Boz. I don't know. It was one of those amazing fighter women. And they said, everybody wants to say, for such a time as this. But what they forget is the other verse that says, and if you do not, your family will be forgotten. You will, and somebody who chooses to say yes, they will rise up and their family will be risen up with them. And that just goes along with everything that you're saying. Like, when you answer the yes and you answer the call and you do what is asked of you and you follow what you are being asked to do, everything comes in God's timing. Everything lines up. And we are living in, I always say, we live in such exciting times. But it's crazy times. But it's hard to believe that 2020 was 5 years ago. Can you believe, the governor election is going to be 6 years after COVID. Yeah. How did that happen? But look how far we've came. Look how.
No, I mean, when you look back, I will tell people. I will tell people this too. I've had several prophetic dreams. One of them I wrote in my book, Lucifer's Zenith, Corrupting Nature's God Through Government Deception. And another one I've freely told about a couple of times in some other interviews, and I'll express it here, was, I had run for Congress back in 2019, which was the start of, really me seeing the corruption behind the scenes and how everything works and functions. But in that process, I started having these prophetic dreams, which I never have. And my wife actually was able to interpret them, which also never happens. And this is how both my wife and I, we prayed about it. We knew that we both believed that we were being spoken to by God spiritually. And it was happening through my dreams, because it also says in the end times that, your young men and women will prophesy, your old men will dream dreams. I guess I'm getting old. I am almost 50 years old. And in that instance, one of the dreams is that I was running in the 25th district at that time, before it just got gerrymandered. And Mike Garcia, who is also a former Navy vet, was kind of pulling ahead. And he and I had roughly pulled papers at the same time, but he had started a little bit sooner, and he was already kind of gearing up, and so he had a really good head start. But I started saying things that a lot of people were really feeling inspired about, they could relate to. And in my dream, I was getting knocked on the door by a relative of mine who works for the California Highway Patrol, and they were giving us a escort to the next debate. And I get into the car, and there's a young version of Mike Garcia. And I didn't understand why he was in my dream. And we were being escorted to what looked like this makeshift sort of auditorium or coliseum that was, made for like a parking garage, where it was shaped like a coliseum, and everybody sort of walked to the edge and they were looking down at us to engage in this sort of makeshift debate. And when we get out, there is this, what looks like a UFC referee standing there, and very imposing. And so we walk up to this referee, and he looks over to Mike Garcia, and Mike Garcia is now wearing this martial art outfit, this white gi with this white belt, and he tells him to pick up this stone about the size of a brick. And the ref holds it, and he tells Mike, break it. And then he breaks it. And then the ref looks over to me, and he looks down, and there's a much larger stone about the size of a tire, and he says, pick it up. So I pick it up, and when I pick it up, I'm now wearing a black gi and a black belt. And he's holding it, and he says, break it. And I sort of smile, and I say, well, I can break that. And he says, okay, then break it. And then I wake up. And my wife turns white, and she looks at me, and she says, I think I know what that means. And I said, okay, what does it mean? And she says, at that time, we were in the middle of the race. She goes, Mike Garcia is going to win the race. And I was like, thanks, love. I appreciate that. I mean, your husband's not going to win. You're supposed to support me. I was teasing her about it. But she says, no. He's wearing a white gi because he's never run for office before. He's breaking the brick because that's the symbol of the district that you live in, and it's a small district, but it's an impactful district. It's considered a purple district. He's going to break the mold and win that district. You are going to pick up something bigger, and you're wearing a black gi and a black belt because you're more seasoned now, and you're not new to it. And whatever that is, you're supposed to break. Well, now here I am, 6 years later. And by the time this race is over with, it'll be 7 years. And biblically, the number 7 is the number of completion, which I don't find coincidental. And so here I am picking up a much bigger brick, which is California. It's a state. And I'm wearing a black gi and a black belt because, well, there's no stage I can't stand on. There's no topic I really can't talk about. It's easy for me to understand the laws because I've been studying the Constitution, because I wanted to understand, why was everything falling on deaf ears? Why were they getting away, these corrupt individuals in office, with what they were doing? How is it that they could pass egregious legislation and disrupt our prosperity for government gain? It didn't make sense to me. And then I realized this was all correlating to the Bible, more so the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, that it got to a point where I was going from town to town, putting on the symposium, that my slides got to about 200 pages. And I was putting on an hour to 2 hour, conference. And I didn't understand, it just kept growing because I just kept digging for more information. And my wife finally said, put it into a book. And so I did. And now, hindsight 2020, here I am. And there's I'm already getting flack for, making comparative videos with other candidates. And it's not that I'm trying to make them look bad. I'm just trying to show you a comparison, my answers versus their answers. And I've gotten phone calls from other candidates' campaigns where they're telling me, back down, get out of the way. You're ruining our ability to raise funds. You're not going to win, all these haters. Then I get threats. I get notes on my car that says, we're going to kill you. We know what your family looks like. Watch out when you step out of your house, stuff like that. I mean, I get it all the time, but that's not going to, that just means I'm going in the right direction.
That's insane. I mean, we have, we know, we always say, the more hate you get, the more over the target you are. When you're getting death threats, it's because you're over the target. You're in the right space. But to have, things left on your car, it's a whole nother level. And because we didn't do your normal intro video that, we've done every time, people listening to this may not know. You said you are fit to stand on any stage, speak on any topic. Take a second, because we kind of skipped over that. We jumped right into the issues that affect people, because parental rights and our kids are nonpartisan issues. That's like an 80-20 issue. Anybody with kids or an investment in kids,
would think that
they're on it.
But I have found that is not the case. You would think that it's a nonpartisan issue, but it is very partisan. in the direction of the fact that our legislators think that the laws don't apply to them, but they make it apply to us, like the Scott Wieners of the bunch that draft, SB 145 and 384 and a bunch of other ones that have to do with, the impropriety of adults 10 years older than a minor, and they separate words like child. Well, if you're a child, you're basically, from 2 to 11 years old. If you're a minor, you're from 12 to 17 years old. They split hairs.
Right.
And so they allow for that. But this is what we're enduring.
Right. Well, and I found a meme, and we talked about it the other day when we broke down the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, that was just kind of scrolling through my Instagram, and I found this thing, and it was talking about like the Green New Deal, and there was this meme, and it was just like, it's so easy to have people just hand you their rights. They just give them away when there's this threat of,
out of fear.
The world is ending, imminent doom, impending doom. That's it. Impending doom. When there's impending doom, people will just hand you their rights. We saw it with COVID. We're seeing it with all this clean energy stuff. Like, the world's going to flood over, and climate change. That's the one.
There's climate change.
It's easy to give up your rights when the world's going to die because cows are farting and whatever. It's ridiculous. But the thing is, you understand, and people need to understand, that our rights are our rights, and we are in charge. And I love that you have just the servant heart.
Yeah, it's more of like, we need our people to have that attitude that it's something to be protected and fought for, and that piece of like eternal vigilance that we need to have every single day, and to be involved, so that some of us that are literally,
this is what we do
all day long. It's all we do, all we think about, we're just so committed that maybe some of that can be off of our plate, and everybody can share in this, wonderful work that we're doing. We really, because it's all of these holes that we have where people are just ready and willing. Our biggest thing that we're fighting right now is community schools. I don't know if you've heard of that, but basically it's the schools taking on medical care for our children, and the parents are just more and more locked out of the system and the loop and not being part of it. I mean, anything from dental care all the way over to reproductive health and mental health and all of it. And, you just talk to parents and you say, they're thinking about doing this in schools, and they're like, sign me up. That sounds so convenient. And you're like, no, this is not it.
That was my whole point of my messy thing about that, was you said, no, it's really not an 80-20 issue. And you might be right, because 80-20, if you're standing out there like we were when we were like, hey, we want to defend girls' spaces, no boys and girls sports. And they're like, yeah, sign me up. And then it's like, no gender affirming surgery for kids. And they're like, and it starts to get a little wonky. But that's where, when you're talking to people one-on-one and you're telling them exactly what the issue is, they're like, yeah, I believe in that. But then when somebody like Scott Wiener gets up there and says, well, it's good for all of mankind, or, Gavin Newsom gets up there and says like, oh, parents are the root of all evil, and why would you trust them? We're the government, we know better. And then parents start to, hand over their rights because there's impending doom.
This is a Marxist tactic. When you know anything about Karl Marx, he spoke about the abolition of family. And that's exactly what a lot of these legislation is doing, is government's coming in telling you, that the family is the negative and they're the positive. And so they draft laws that are contradictory to the supreme law of the land by playing around with the language, right? And this is why I tell people, you really do have to pay attention. It's very subtle, right? I've used examples in the past before. I think one of them is back, with Obama. It was like, they were trying to say it's not kids in cages, right? It's migrant facilities, right? It's not somebody who is engaged in, alcohol abuse. It's substance use disorder, right? It's, you don't say the gay community. You have to say the LGBTQ plus, IASS22IA community, right? Like there's you have to be more politically correct, but it's the changing of the language that disrupts linguistical canons to get people to think it's not the world is falling, it's climate change, or it's climate boiling, or it's global warming, global boiling, and so on. It's a way for them to disrupt your mentality and thinking one thing, right? It's not a lockdown, it's a stay-at-home safe order, right? It's not infringement upon your Second Amendment, it's banning assault weapons. But you can't name me one weapon that wasn't designed to assault. They're all designed to assault. It's a play on words. And so when they can convince people of that sort of changing of the language, then they draft it with their legal language using lawyers, which really aren't supposed to participate in our legislation. They're not supposed to even be in office, and that's a whole other story for another time. But this is what we have to deal with, and it's so legalistic that people don't quite understand what they're up against. And so then they think it's a great idea, and this is why then you go and you vote. And I have a video out there where I've told people, I said, you ever vote for a proposition and you vote yes, but you walk away and you felt like you voted no, and you voted no, you really voted yes. And that's the design of how they get you. But they draft it in a way where it doesn't matter if you vote yes or no. It's tied to a model bill, and a model bill is what your corporations draft. Their lawyers will draft a model bill, which is a plug and play, and then your team of lawyers will move and shift it around in a way that it looks different, and they're all different pages, but the essential foundation of that bill is a plug and play because of the certain words and languages that are used to ensure that government succeeds in generating the revenue that they require, or removing the laws to grant themselves more charge, like granting them authority over a parent. So when you look at and I wrote about this in my book, but when you look at it was an old bill, I think it was AB 957 at that time. Here's the other thing too, in the state of California, not to digress, but they will repeat the bills every year, right? So they'll just keep going down the line, and then they'll repeat it when they get to the same number. That's designed to confuse you. So AB 5 from 2 years ago is an AB 5 today. But AB 957, that was, I believe, 2 years ago, was a family court code that where parents who were in the middle of a divorce fighting for custody, they threw in the fact that that both parents needed to at least confirm gender trans ideologies, fluidity and all that other good stuff. The problem is that if one parent did not confirm or affirm their child's transgenderism or the ideology of it, then the courts would favor, under the family court code, the other parent who would. And so the problem with that, though, was Gavin Newsom threw it back and he sent it down, and people thought, oh, he's seeing the light. No, he didn't see the light. It wasn't ironclad. And the way it wasn't ironclad was, if you get a smart parent who says, well, I'm not going to affirm or deny, well, now what do? The courts then have to go back and adhere to the old family court codes. Right. So it's not ironclad. So then the judge can't sit there and say, well, a lack of affirming or denying in any way is not confirmation that the parent is denying transgenderism or is affirming transgenderism. They're just neutral. Well, then there is no code to go along with that could then remove the child from the other parent who's fighting for equal custody. So he threw it down. See, when you understand this, then you understand how they're trying to play around with the legal language, and they're cornering parents because, it's an abolition. When you can disrupt the traditional family, what we call the nuclear family, when you disrupt that, then you can disrupt those linguistical canons that the courts usually adhere to for max context. And so this is why they keep refining it when it comes to, medical permissions that are lined up, where a 12-year-old now no longer really has to show their parents their record. There has to be some sort of formality through the insurance provider that children can kind of see their own doctors without their parents, even though the parents are the providers, right? So all these bills, they're all designed to keep breaking down the family so that government comes in, which is Marxism. They're just not calling it Marxism.
Right.
And if you don't know the history of this and you put in the wrong person in office, you're just robbing Peter to pay Paul. And this is the part that I've been trying to wake up people and trying to show them there is another choice. Stop going along with the establishment candidates. Stop picking the person who wants to build bridges and break bread with these people instead of holding them accountable. And we're not going to get anywhere. If we don't get it right, we're not going to get it at all. We're really going to we're just exchanging. Just like when they got rid of, I think it was Cuomo in New York as governor, well, they just replaced him with another equally, if not more, horrible governor. And so
Right.
look what we're dealing with right now, right? They just keep
I
robbing
think a
Peter to
lot of
pay
people
Paul.
say that wrong. I think or maybe they're just getting it completely wrong. I'm not really sure. But to me, in America, there's beauty in the fact that, I mean, if we have fair elections, because this all starts with fair elections, right? But there's beauty in the fact that we have to have some come along, and we have to have the good ideas. We have to have the forums to put those good ideas out there, and then we have to have the people come to our side. We have lost this attitude of what it means to be an American, and I love that you want to instill that in people. I think that's really important. But there is a lot of moms out there just, right now probably having their headphones on and doing their dishes and, listening to our podcast right now and going, there's a long ways from, I'm grabbing my gun and storming into a school board meeting to, okay, we need to get the right people in there, and we need them to lead us. And they're looking for leaders. Because we're not there. We're not where we need to be. What we need right now is people to educate the public and to get back to that place. And this is why our fight, we really feel like, is in the classroom, and getting those kids to understand that, getting our children to understand that, and to fight for those rights that we already have. We have them. We only have them if we keep them and we have that attitude that we have.
Well,
them.
and two things on that, because I know how you're going to respond, because I see your reaction, Daniel. So when you made this comparison for John, with John, so I want to give you the floor to do it again. When you compare being a servant and being a leader to how Jesus was, right? Because he's the ultimate leader, but he came in as a servant, right? Mm-hmm. And then the other thing that I wanted to point out was, I love that you brought up Gavin Newsom shutting down that bill, because at the time that happened, people don't realize there's more to that story. So I love that you told that whole story, because at the time that happened, there were 2 or 3 other pieces of harmful legislation. And I wish I knew we would have addressed this. I will find them and I will put them in the comments. That passed at that same time.
Yes.
And it seemed like his play was, look, I don't hate parental rights altogether. I'm going to shut this one down, and look at me, yay, pro-parent. Well, at the same time, these 2 other equally, if not more harmful bills went through, right?
Yes.
And so it was kind of like a dog and pony show over here, while these harmful things snuck in. But at the same time, he wasn't shutting that down. And that's the narrative that people missed. He wasn't shutting it down. He was sending it back for a gut and amend to make it worse, not better, not shutting down, make it worse so that it can stick harder.
It to be, it was actually attached to a penal code where it literally made it to where it was the parent, the affirming parent was the safe parent, the non-affirming parent, for the health, safety, and well-being of the child, needed to lose their parental rights. So, I mean, this bill, once they do shore up all of their, whatever they're doing, when they eventually get this passed, and the sad part is they don't even need it passed, because the courts right now are adhering to it. We have several parents that have come to us in Shasta County alone for help on this very issue. We've seen 3 fathers lose their parental rights over this. So the courts are already doing this. So this, like she said, it really was all fake. All fake.
Well, here's
it's
the
happening.
thing. Let me break it up too. Again, it comes down to, first and foremost, education. If I ask you, how do you get rid of a judge? Do you know?
I mean, I believe there's a recall process.
But have you gone through the Judicial Performance Committee outlined in the state constitution?
I mean, I read it.
My point to that is nobody goes after judges. We always think that they're nonpartisan. The problem with judges is they're not nonpartisan. What are they partisan? They're partisan to what? The Constitution. They have to be. per their oath of office. Why? Because they signed a contract. That contract is purposeful because of the contract clause in the United States Constitution, Article 1, Section 10, right? So when we look at that, we realize, okay, they're bound. But how do we handle these sort of quote-unquote nonpartisan judges, right? Is you have to remove them. But there's methods to remove them. And nobody goes down that path because we think, well, they're nonpartisan and, they have to remain unbiased, especially if you go to court and you have to, stand jury trial. Sometimes if you're going to be selected, you have to fill out all this extra questionnaire to make sure whether or not that you are, of a mindset of fairness, unbiasedness, and so on. That's what you call jury tampering and adhering to court edicts. We're not subject to that. But if you don't know that, then you don't know how to handle judges and you don't know how to handle family court codes, because you talked about codes and you talked about penal codes and mandates and regulations and policies and procedures and stuff. None of those can actually adhere and supersede the highest authority of the land, which is the state constitution, and that can't supersede if it's repugnant. The supreme law of the land has to be an agreement, and wherever there is a disalignment, it's null and void. But you have to know this first, and if you don't understand, the outlines of the primable, then it really gets confusing to people. This is why we have to be really
I
heavily
1,000% agree with you, and I'm a total student of this from our friend Terry. And like I said, 5 years ago, I didn't know any of this. I was just completely lost, and come so far in this 5 years. But no matter what, I could know all of those things and have all the perfect attitudes and walk in today to a courtroom with all of that behind me and literally hit a wall, because I will not have the support behind me of the people. And that is where we have to get the education to people and not judge them, not say, okay, well, how dare you be, derelict in your duties of being a citizen of the United States of America, but really just give them that come along and that space to get to where they need to be, because we have 3 fathers that have lost their kids, and they will do anything. They will come in with all the knowledge and all the great attitudes, but it doesn't matter because these courts are getting away with it. And they're getting away with it every single day.
That's why I said is there's very few people that go after the judges themselves, which myself and a handful of people have, and have gotten similar results or helpful results that help the parent retain their kid, or at least have some sort of custody with their child. It's a difficult process. I think I have over 20 or 30 different kinds of prospects going on up and down the state, helping different groups, particularly going after. One of them is Scott Wiener. The other ones is egregious legislation that's passed at the local levels, school board members, police officers that I've had to help people out with. Also retaining jobs, during the COVID stuff, I lost count over after 700 and some odd people that I helped retain their jobs because of understanding the laws, or at least knowing enough to push back to know that they know that you know better, and they're less likely to move forward. Because one thing that they do is they do play by their own rules. You just don't know the rules. And it's very difficult for people to have one foot in, one foot out. Hence the reason why I'm running for governor, because I know people are lazy-minded in some respect, not because they want to be, but because they're inundated. So it forces you to not want to dig down. Who wants to, when they get their weekend, pick up a 20-page legislation and start reading it, breaking it down? And
there are some nerds out there. I'm just saying.
There are for sure. I have a number of friends that do this regularly, which is, I thank God for them, because when I can't keep up and I'm trying to campaign, they're very like, hey, did you check out this bill? And I said, I didn't even know about it, because like I said, there's over, 2,000 to 5,000 bills being drafted. It's hard to keep up for sure. And they do that purposely to overwhelm you. Mm-hmm. But this is the other thing too. It's also, like you said, everything starts with education, 100%. I agree with that across the board, because that's why I said, if you don't know any of this, then you don't really know how to protect yourself, and you don't know how to fight back, at least legally, lawfully, constitutionally, before you start, like you said, the one war that we haven't engaged in is an arsenal war. And as a veteran, that's not one that I want. I don't want to see that. I don't want that knocking on my doorsteps, but we are a hair's breadth away, in my personal opinion, because of the amount of people that I've spoken to that are just over it. Right. And when they're at that point, that's a dangerous place to be in, because they're ready to throw off and engage in abolishment. The only way to engage in abolishment and set up new guards is through another war, another civil war. And that is the last thing I want, because, dare I say, that is something that the corrupt in government want this, right? The sons of disobedience that are hiding behind the walls of our government institutions want that, to make the excuse of, well, we just need to get rid of the Constitution when it's beautifully written. And this is why I say, and I disagree with you in this, and I say it respectfully, but we need to stop asking for leaders. They are not your leaders. When you ask that, you're asking to be placed under the thumb of the government. You are the sovereign. Mm-hmm. Sovereign is like the Queen of England and the King of England. Nobody can bring a charge against them, because sovereignty in and of itself creates the laws. This has already been ruled upon. And yet, if we don't know this, then we do exactly what the court said, which I brought up in the last interview, which was U.S. versus Minker, 1956. The judge says in the transcript that what appears to be lawful on the surface, people are cunningly coerced into waiving their rights due to ignorance. So the courts are telling you, they know that you don't know any better. They know that you don't have the legalistic language. They know that you're probably not going to engage in self-litigation, which they hate. Because if you are a smart litigator or self-litigator, they are going to have to fall prey back to the Constitution, but they don't, right? Because they know that you don't know their court edicts, because they adhere to corpus juris secundum, not the Constitution, which is why a lot of times the Constitution gets thrown out, because you didn't know any better, you didn't understand the contracts. So this is why I say stop calling them your leaders, because then what you're asking is somebody to step in your stead and hopefully do the right thing. Which is why I said I'm not going to do the right thing. I'm going to do the God-given constitutionally right thing. There's a big difference between the two. And when you ask someone to represent you, they have to understand that they have now given up certain unalienable rights to secure the rights of the people. When you ask for a leader, they need to look to you. You're the leader. You vote me in office, you're my leader. I'm not yours. I'm your servant. And I have to do everything I can to stay within the confines to the limitation of powers. And if I don't know what that means, well, it most certainly doesn't mean I get to grant myself more charge to base myself above you. The people, their status is above government at all times. That is the definition to the Constitution for we the people, because it's the first contract that has been established between government body and we the people, the sovereigns. When you know this, then you're going to start asking and stop seeking candidates who are pining to wear the crown of leadership, instead looking for the candidates that are working to, serve the people and wear the shoes of servanthood. That's what we need, because then they have a clear understanding of their powers and authorities vested, granted by the people.
Absolutely. I was in a worship service last night, and I love one of the verses was, "Please let me not seek a crown." And so I love that. That should not be us. And so my next and last question to you was going to be, please explain to people why, being a servant is better than being a leader, which I think you did that before I could even ask the question, and why I have just leaps and bounds flung over to the support Daniel Mercuri, get him in front of everybody that you can side, because I love that. You have a servant's heart, and I love that. But not only that, you're so knowledgeable and you are so experienced. And so I want you to close on that, because we get into these fun debates, and for us, government is life. We've made a life. We woke up and then said, why isn't everybody doing this? Why isn't everybody understanding that? And so Katie and I have kind of found a way to make our livelihood that, how do we wake up people? How do we make government life? How do we just get these people to run? And how do we, but not everybody's on that level. So we get in these conversations because now we found somebody that we can have these conversations with, and it's fun. But we've gotten away from, tell the people who you are. You've talked a little bit about why you're running. Tell them who you are as a person. Tell them what your experience is, because again, we keep skipping over that. And then end with how they can find you, how they can connect with you. But let's wrap up here. But I want you to take that moment to just really introduce yourself and tell people why you're so experienced, why you can speak on, why you can stand on any stage, why you can fight any battle, why you will be the servant that will take us to that next level and defend every one of their rights.
That's a really, really big question. So I will try to summarize as best I can. I think for me, it really came down to the fact as to, one, why I stopped looking for a leader and I started looking for a servant was because these are representative positions that are servants of the people. They're here to secure their rights. But I didn't quite understand that until I realized what our forefathers did with the Declaration of Independence when they wrote the word that they do ordain, right? Meaning that, they're going to charge this contract, this agreement, this constitution, this great experiment that they called America. And I didn't quite understand where they were leading when I read that word, do ordained, right? Because when we think about somebody being ordained, we think about somebody, becoming a priest, and following suit to the religious practices and faith. And that forced me to go down to what our forefathers were doing. And when I read the Declaration of Independence, realizing that it's, really based off of the Magna Carta of 1215, I had to read that. And when I realized this, that when you look at our memoirs of some of our forefathers, and there's 56 of them, and I've only gotten through maybe about 10 of them, and I haven't even finished those. They're the language that they wrote wrote beautifully and painted murals with their words. I have to have a thesaurus and a dictionary next to me so that I can really clearly try to understand where they were coming from, that they truly created a new covenant with God. And that told me that do ordained wasn't just they were going to do something faithfully. They were going to do something faithfully to God, because it was that covenant for this country to God. And I had to understand, well, which God? Because I've always heard that our forefathers were deists at best. And they weren't. They were servants of Christ. They believed in Jesus. Yes, Hamilton has some arguments, and he wasn't always in agreement with the Bible. But, it was Hamilton's, it was Adams, and it was George Washington and a number of others that literally wrote that, I think it was Washington who stipulated and said in his memoirs that, if you adhere to the writings of Jesus, you will have a better life. Paraphrasing. But the fact that he was using the word Jesus, they knew to take from the Bible, which is why the Constitution harmonizes more so with biblical principles than any other religion that's out there. So that told me that our forefathers were servants. They weren't leaders. They acted as a community together, but they did it as the foundation of having Jesus. So much so that they wrote about Jesus in the Declaration of Independence, but a lot of people don't study this. And I said this in the last interview, and I try to let people know that God is mentioned 4 times in the Declaration of Independence, that they adhere, that the Creator, the laws of nature, nature's God, the Judge of the world, and divine providence. So those are the 4 sections of the Declaration of Independence. But I didn't know, well, which God are they talking about? When they said the Judge of the world, then you have to read your Bible. And that, when I went into Acts 17, I found in Acts 17, verse 30, I think it is, don't quote me that, but I'm pretty sure that's the verse, that God appoints Jesus as the judge of the world. And then in multiple verses that Jesus will judge both the living and the dead. That's the only religion is Christianity, the New Testament, that mentions that Jesus is the judge of the world. I have not found any other religion that uses that phrase. So our forefathers were genius in putting that in there, knowing that in their times people knew who they were talking about. But in our times we have no clue. And when I realized that, I realized they weren't trying to lead. They were trying to serve. They were trying to adhere to the crown. When you look at their 27 list of redress of grievances to the crown, and saying that if the crown wasn't going to listen, that then they were going to engage in setting up a new government in the way that they were going to do it, and that it was by way and the right of the people to institute new guards when tyrannical regimes, start to peek their heads out. And I realized this is what we've fallen prey to, that we are living in a democracy and not a constitutional republic. And a lot of people say, well, this is a democratic, representative democracy. No, it's not. That was Hamilton, who had asked the question, once we won our independence, do we garner into becoming a democracy, a representative democracy? Because they weren't sure. Because they knew, when you look at their memoirs, there's tons of them where they all said that they knew that they never knew a democracy that didn't commit suicide. So they knew that wasn't the direction to go in, because democracy meant that you were going to live under a majority rule or the major rulers. So when you live in a constitutional republic, it means that God-given endowments come first. Government needs come last. You never run the state like a business, and you adhere to the laws of nature and nature's God, which is common law. When you live in a democracy, government needs come first, which is Marxism and equity-based government, and then individual needs come last. They remove God, and they run the state like a business to force the people to have to meet on a profit margin, which is why we're being so overly taxed right now. Taxation without representation. So now I understand. We need to stop looking for leaders, because we're the leaders. We are the sovereigns of this land. They do as we say, because we're granting them our consent to secure our rights, which is their only job. Secure the rights of the people, which is our will. And that means that they have to adhere to the writings of the teachings of the Bible because of the new covenant that they outlined for this country. If you do not understand that, then this is why we're here in this mess in the first place, is because we fall and prey to leaders and hoping that they're going to tell us what to do so we can get back to our decadence. That is not how it's supposed to be. We are required, we are demanded, the way our forefathers wrote it out, that we are the rulers of this land, that we engage in more self-governance with a smaller government. And this is why I said in some of my slogans, it's time to starve the government and feed the people. And to answer the last question, I'm just an everyday person. I work just like everybody else. I homeschool my children because of the incident that happened with my son. I'm never going to subject my children to this indoctrination. I'm never going to subject my children to this perversion. And until we can get a hold of our schools and our infrastructure on what it means to be educated in the areas that we know that they should know, math, reading, arithmetic, English, writing, all the things that they're supposed to be, not this pronoun and this Marxism agenda and socialistic, factions to get people, these children, to hate their own country and, defile their own flag. I don't stand for that because it's a hatred syndrome. And just like any other parent, the more I learned, the more I realized I couldn't turn my back. I couldn't just walk away with the information that I learned. I realized I needed to be a watcher on the wall. In fact, we all are required to be watchers on the wall, to sound the alarm, to educate ourselves, and to ensure that we don't lose this. This is why our forefathers said, that they were instituting a republic form of government, which is so much so they put it into the Constitution and then annotated a note, if you can keep it. Well, we're about to lose it. And that is because we expect someone else to stand in our stead. When we are, again, the rulers of this land, they are there to ensure that no depravity encroaches upon the people's right and engage in more self-governance than what we've ever had before. That's freedom. And that freedom has always been outlined in the Declaration of Independence, in the Constitution with, I think it's, truth is self-evident, all men are created equal. We are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, and governments derives their just powers from the consent of the governed. All this is already outlined for us as to having a more perfect union. And this is what we've gotten away with. And this is what I want to get us back to, because I want to get back to my life. I enjoyed my life. I enjoyed my small businesses, but it got destroyed by corrupt government. And I wanted my kids to go to school, to have that rite of passage, go to prom and, Friday nights under the lights and play a good football game and enjoy, meeting new kids and developing friendships and stuff. And they're not really going to get that because I don't want them exposed to this corruption and this mindset, this sickness. And so really this is the whole reason why I'm here, is to set it right, is to ensure that accountability is paramount. And I define accountability as prison, because without it, what's the point? And this is why I'm in this race, not for a career. I'm in this to clean house.
I love that. So you're here to serve and then get out, which is what our founding fathers did. George Washington could have been president for forever, but he said, no, I'm here to serve and then get out. And it's the next person's job, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
I love that. Daniel, where do people go to find you, learn more about you?
People can go to my website first at danielforcalgovernor.com. So that's DANIEL for FOR Cal CAL governor.com. On there, one of the best things that people can do, of course, is donate. I'm every little bit counts. But if you can't do that, I get it. We're on tough times and people are kind of exhausted and politically exhausted and donating exhausted. I get it. One of the best things that people can do is find one of my social media pages. I have, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, X, and find one of those platforms that you're on, Rumble, and maybe share my videos to other people. Watch my videos. There's several topics of things that I talk about, many other interviews. Also, you can read my policies on there if you just want to look at where I stand on certain subject matters. If you don't want to read it, you can watch it. And if you want to help out, I have a link on my website where you can download flyers and you can print them out yourself at home, and you can just go door knocking if you want to, or you can leave a stack, in an area or group, or a number of people that maybe you do a Bible study with, or maybe you just like to hang out with your friends and you want to kind of just hand it out. A little bit goes a long way, and if you have any questions and you want to talk to me directly, I do have a campaign phone line that I actually do pick up when I can. So I encourage you, if you want to talk to me, or you have something to say, you can leave a message. I will hear it, as well as my team members, and you can text as well. So there's a lot of ways that you can get in touch with me.
I appreciate it. I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. And
thank you for having me.
Everybody that tells me, well, we've just got to go with whoever the establishment picks, and we got to run. My answer to them is, we have a year. And I have a year to get every candidate in front of everybody. And so if people, like you said, like, share, follow, like the video, share the video, get it out to your friends, send it to your friends. If something that was said today resonates with you, send it out. Thank you to our sponsors who help keep the lights on. And thank you to Mountaintop Media for hosting our show. And thank you again, my friend, for coming on. And hopefully, we get your message in front of as many people as we can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to take the time to thank the sponsors that help keep our lights on, and our partnership with 22 Salute Coffee. They have absolutely amazing coffee. Their bourbon is absolutely the best bourbon I've ever had. It helps keep the lights on here. If you go to Mountaintop Media and purchase, you save 10%, and the rest of the money goes towards helping first responders and veteran suicide prevention. So you're supporting a good cause, you're getting a good product, and you're helping us keep the lights on here, which we have no outside funding, no government funding, no NGO funding, so it really helps us. Jefferson State Diesel, absolutely the best place to take your diesel in. If you have a vehicle with a diesel, they're absolutely the best. Both owners are on site. They support the community. They always are supporting patriots. And there's absolutely nowhere else I would go to take my truck to get worked on and trust them to do a good job and never scam somebody. And they help us keep the lights on here. They're our number one first sponsor that really stepped up to the plate. I also want to take the time to give a shout out to Taylor Motors. They are an amazing family. If I was going to go and buy a new vehicle, absolutely, I would go nowhere else other than Taylor Motors. And they also sell used vehicles. So, and if you buy that, it's new to you. And they are actually, they're a top tier sponsor. They really stepped up to the plate. They're always going to fundraisers to support the right people. They're huge supporters of the right people in the community. And they have a lot of integrity, and the family's great. Also, Taylor Collision Center. Hopefully I don't get any accidents, or somebody just actually swiped my wife's vehicle the other day in the parking lot, and they just drove off, and it was a little ding. So I'm not necessarily, I don't know if we're going to take that in, but hopefully nobody bangs my truck up or her vehicle to where we have to take it in there. But if I did, I would absolutely take it to Taylor Collision Center. They have a lot of integrity, very good, honest people. And there's nowhere else I would take my vehicle. Thank you for watching, and support the other people in the community that support us.